Once again, it is time for us to set sail and undertake a new voyage of discovery. In the last series, we traveled inwards, seeking to learn the history and the science of the ever smaller world of atoms and subatomic particles. This time, we will travel in the opposite direction. We will follow our compass outward, away from land, into the vast uncharted ocean beyond our world. We will follow the maps left for us by those who have gone before, but we will also be sure to make our own observations so that we may become familiar with the skies, just as they did. In setting our course, we will follow the instructions of another famous ship captain to his navigator, paraphrasing a children's story. Second star to the right, straight on till morning.
Hello, and welcome to the Scientific Odyssey. The Scientific Odyssey is a many-part journey into the history and philosophy of science. My name is Chad Davies, and I'm the writer, host, and producer of the podcast, where we consider the ideas, processes, and results of over 2,500 years of scientific inquiry and discovery.
Series 3, Finding Our Place. Episode 0, Beyond the Horizon. Before we begin this first episode of our new season, I want to welcome a new addition to the crew. Throughout this series, I'll be using music from a collective out of Portland, Oregon called the Blue Dot Sessions. They've been kind enough to let me include in our soundtrack a number of their compositions to help set the mood for what we'll be discussing, and so I'd like to give them credit for their work and a bit of a shout out. If you're looking for some excellent instrumental compositions, you can find them at their website, www.sessions.blue, or at freemusicarchive.org. So, for this series, I want to consider our next big idea, cosmology. Today, this is a field of scientific inquiry that attempts to understand the nature of the universe on its grandest of scales. But that's not how it began. Cosmology started when human beings first asked the question, what is my place in all of this? And it is likely, I think, that this question was first asked as people gathered together, perhaps around a small fire, as a defense against the long, lonely, dark night, and looked into the sky. The night is even more richly colored than the day. If only one pays attention to it, one sees that certain stars are citron yellow, while others have a pink glow, or a green, blue, and forget-me-not brilliance. And without my expiating on this theme, it should be clear that putting little white dots on a blue-black surface is not enough. Vincent van Gogh. Night is woven into the very fundamental fabric of the human experience. For most of our species' existence, it has been primordial and encompassing. In the Indo-European language group, the letter N has been associated with it from nearly the beginning. In Hittite, the word is nikas, associated with the Sanskrit word for darkness, nakti. The Egyptians called their goddess of the sky Nut, while the Greeks named the goddess of the night Nyx. By 825 CE, Germanic peoples called the time from sunset to sunrise Nacht. It is through this lineage that in English we arrive at the word night, first used by Shakespeare in A Midsummer Night's Dream. For most cultures, night has been feminine, a designation applied to its greatest light, the moon. From Artemis and Selene to Sting's famous lyric, "My sister's eyes are nothing like the sun," night is subtler and more mysterious. In Taoist teaching, it is the endless well of yin energy to balance and breed the yang of day. Like the Greek mythologies, the Abrahamic creation song begins with the darkness. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. To quote from Christopher Dewdney's wonderful book, Acquainted with the Night, he writes, quote, "Night is profoundly in our souls and minds, our hearts and bodies. It is woven into our language. There are 1,001 Arabian Nights, and each night has 1,000 eyes. There is music and rhythm in the night, and a nightingale sings in Barclay Square. Night crawlers glisten on residential lawns, while downtown night owls rub shoulders with fly-by-nights. The Victorians slept in nightshirts by the glow of their oil-burning nightlights. We used to don nightcaps for bed. Now we down a couple before calling it a night. Soldiers use night vision on midnight patrols. Night porters dream of nightclubs where nighthawks party into the wee hours. There are night watchmen, night walkers, and night stalkers. Ladies of the night come and go, speaking of Caravaggio. And finally, there is the night before the night of nights." We, in our modern world, encounter and take for granted miraculous things as a matter of course. The technology through which you are able to listen to this podcast is just one of the unbelievably amazing things that we have developed through the lens of thousands of years of innovation. We fly through the air. We navigate using satellites placed in geosynchronous orbit. We communicate over vast distances nearly instantaneously. We usually accept these things as a matter of course, but they are not so ingrained in our lives that we don't, from time to time, consider just how extraordinary they are. Even if we don't always grasp how remarkable it is that the millions of dollars spent to develop a number of technologies to place a human being on the moon have led to something that can be had for less than a month's paycheck for many. But beyond that, there are other things that I think most of us don't even give a second thought to. For example, so accustomed have we become to the regular production of food that we rarely, even for a moment, consider all of the ancient knowledge that had to be accumulated and understood before regular harvest became the norm. When we go into the grocery store, some of us might fret over the effects that industrialized agriculture has on our world and whether such practices are sustainable. But I'm guessing that we never give even the slightest thought to those first steps towards agriculture that began long before the seeds were first planted in the ground. It is a pity, in an age of rockets and space telescopes, that so few people have a direct acquaintance with the stars. Learning the stars and following their nightly courses across the sky brings a deep satisfaction, born of familiarity with something both ancient and ageless. Writer Richard Berry. In the same way, for many in modern society, the connection to the sky and the night has been lost. What was once such a central part of the human experience has been banished by the bright lights and busy schedules made possible by our own relentless intellectual curiosity. For those who live in cities, the night sky is reduced to a few bright points of light, no more than a few dozen, glanced at in passing as we travel along our way from one thing to another. For us now, the passage of time is not counted by cycles of the heavens, but kept by days marked off a calendar and alarm clocks found in every location and carried with us. And while these tools allow for us to track events and plan the future with an astonishing precision that was unimaginable just 500 years ago, they have also allowed us to disengage with the cycles and rhythms of the sky that first defined them. For the first humans, found in families and tribes, the sky was a fundamental aspect of the reality in which they found themselves. For them, They were not just a few stars, but thousands upon thousands spread across the velvet blackness like perfectly polished gemstones. Though the world around them was wild and often unpredictable, the sky was different. Night after night, month after month, year after year, it marched through the same cycles, and thus it became what defined time and offered security. Something it would do for civilizations and societies, millennia upon millennia, when the chaos of human interaction threatened to overwhelm sanity. Its regularity allowed the first hunter-gatherers, and then those who settled into towns and cities, to predict. It told them when the herds of wild animals would migrate, and when the weather might turn warm or cold. It guided them in their travels, and allowed them to plan for the flooding of rivers. It became the one reliable touchstone for those seeking to survive in a harsh and hard world. The unchanging change came to define first divinity and then immortality. And so it invaded all aspects of their lives. It engaged them in a way that we have lost for the most part. They told stories about it and placed their hopes and fears among it. They constructed monuments, buildings, and even cities in ways to keep track of it. They wove it into their clothes, engraved it into their tools, and organized nearly every single aspect of their lives around it. Those who understood things about the cycles of the sky became powerful figures in their societies, and they used that power to affect the destinies of their people, sometimes for the good of the entire community, and sometimes, as is often the case in human history, merely for their own benefit. Looking at these stars suddenly dwarfed my own troubles and all the gravities of terrestrial life. I thought of their unfathomable distance and the slow, inevitable drift of their movements out of the unknown past into the unknown future. H.G. Wells. For us to understand the cosmos and our place in it, we need to go all the way back. Back before science and before natural philosophy. Back before civilization and writing. Astronomy goes back to the beginning of the human experience, and it is there that we will start. The good thing about this is that we can all experience some part of what they might have, if we are but willing to travel away from the lights for a time and set aside our technology. It is in this way, and this way only, that we can reconnect with what was, for most of human history, the greatest of all canvases, that of the heavens. We can spread out a blanket on the ground under the expanse of the stars and find ourselves in much the same place as our most ancient ancestors. And when we do that, when we re-engage with the natural world around us in this way, we will discover the heart of inquiry. It is built into us, a part of us, inseparable from what makes us human. Looking up into that vast vault of the sky calls to that thing in the human spirit that wants to know and understand. That part of us that questions and seeks answers to the questions. And so we will follow the questions asked and the answers arrived at. We will examine the first cosmologies and how they shaped the fabric of the ancient peoples and civilizations that developed them. We will learn to make observations of the night sky, and, from the accumulated data, we will discover the patterns and cycles of the heavens. We will discover, as did our ancestors, how to tell time. We will hear their stories and myths, and learn how the sky connected to their experience and their existence. From this, we will develop models of what goes on in those starry realms, and by doing so, enter into some of the first truly scientific activities in the human experience. We will span nearly 1,500 years to enter a rebirth and learn of a new explanation told in a new story. But a word of caution. The story many of us know about this time is an archetypical one, with heroes and villains and courageous battles and the triumph of truth over superstition and falsehood. As with all archetypical stories, there are some things in the story that are certainly true. but there is much that has been simplified and glossed over. We will search among the evidence to uncover the real and better story, one so much more human in its telling. Following the metaphor of Carl Sagan, we will begin on the shores of our cosmic ocean and set sail to travel ever further outward. We will encounter some machines that can gather data for us even as they speed away from our shores without us, and other machines that can look back billions of years in time. We will engage in the debates and discussions that have moved humanity from the center of all things to being part of a universe more vast than we could have ever begun to imagine. We will make extraordinary claims based on extraordinary evidence, won over centuries of patient observation. And, at the end, we will know our place, both mundane and sublime, in the vastness of all the cosmos. So provision yourself for the journey. The captain's first request is that we find time to get away from the lights that block out the sky. For this first part of the journey, we need take nothing but our senses, our intellect, and the curiosity that we, as a species, bear in such incredible abundance. We will unfurl our sails at the setting of the sun to travel beyond the horizon. Until next time, full sails on your journey.